Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with another Books Beside My Bed video. This reading wrap up is for the week of the 29th of April until the 5th of May, and I can't believe it's May already. This week I read 5 books, a total of 1,759 pages, and my yearly reading total is up to 75 books. For those who are interested, I have also been watching a tiny little bit of TV. I started watching the new series of Lost in Space on Netflix, which I'm really enjoying. I was not much of a fan of the older series and the movies. Well, I shouldn't say not a fan, I haven't really watched them, but my mum was a big fan of them, so I grew up knowing about them. And I'm really pleasantly surprised by this series, so hopefully I'll get to finish it in the next couple of weeks. I'm also continuing to watch Harrow on ABC here in Australia. Great series about a pathologist who has a bit of a secret. I'm also about to start reading Only Human by Sylvain Neuvel. I have the audiobook for this and I'm going to read it hopefully tonight. So this will be the next book that you hear and I'm really excited about it. Okay, now into the books. The majority of the books that I read this week were review copies, so please bear that in mind. The first one that I read was Tight Quarters by Annabeth Elbert. This was a review copy sent to me from NetGalley. It is due to be released on the 1st of July, I believe, and it's published by Carina Press, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It is the 6th book in the Out of Uniform series, which follows a group of Navy SEALs and their relationships. They are all male-male romance books with various representations of the LGBTQIA+ community. This book features Petty Officer Bacon, who is a Navy sharpshooter, and he also identifies as pan. And he is given the job of babysitting a journalist named Spencer Bryant, who is embedded with his unit. Things get awkward because they're both very attracted to one another, but because of their situation, they decide to try and ignore it. There's a bit of flirting, but there's a lot of angst, and eventually their relationship develops, and it's how they deal with their change in circumstance and their feelings towards one another and trying to make their relationship work in a way that suits both of them. I really enjoy this series. You guys hear me talk about it every couple of months because I'm always requesting the next book in the series. I just think they're fun, they're easy to read, they've got great characters, and I can't recommend it highly enough. Then I read To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo. This was sent to me by Allen & Unwin for review, so thank you very much to them. This is a 2018 release from Hotkey, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It is a sort of Little Mermaid retelling, except we're not talking about mermaids, we're talking about sirens. And sirens are quite dark creatures. Lyra is a siren princess, and sirens collect human hearts. Lyra herself has a penchant for collecting the hearts of princes. And one day she angers her mother and is forbidden from collecting the heart of a prince for her birthday. And then she discovers that Prince Elian, who is the heir to one of the most powerful thrones in this world, is also a sailor, and she thinks that if she collects his heart, her mother will forgive her and let her back into the fold. And then things happen and her plan sort of goes horribly awry. It took me a little while to get into this. I am struggling with fantasy at the minute. I think I talked about it last week. I really think I've moved on from the fantasy genre a little bit. I still enjoy it, but it just takes me a while to get going. I was really hoping that this was going to be quite dark, and in a lot of ways it was, and then it sort of shifted a little bit in tone. Not necessarily in a bad way, but I think if you are looking for something that is truly dark the whole way through, this is not it, because it's YA. I think you can't sustain it in a story like this, particularly because you're going for a romance angle, and there is a romance sort of thing that happens between Lyra and Elian, and I think we have a tendency to romanticize all of those dark sort of mythology stories that we know. It makes it more palatable for us to read, and I think that's what happened a little bit here. What I did really like was the banter between the characters. That was fantastic. I love reading sharp dialogue between characters, and I really enjoyed that. So 3 out of 5 stars. It's worth a read if you're interested in sirens, if you like Little Mermaid retellings, and if you can, you know, stomach a little bit of romanticism on your darker mythological creatures. Next I read Someone Like You by Carly Lane. Again, this was a review copy from Allen & Unwin. It is a 2018 release from Allen & Unwin, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I love Carly Lane's books. That is not even a question now. If you'd asked me 2 years ago if I would read a book like Someone Like You, I would have said hell no, because I don't believe myself to be someone who likes romance stories or anything like that. These have proven me wrong because I enjoy them. This helps to cleanse my reading mind after I read all sorts of heavier fantasy sci-fi sort of type books, because they're light, they're easy to read, they've got wonderful characters, it's set in a place that I recognize, and I just feel so much for these characters. Maybe it's also because I'm now in the age bracket of these characters as well, and I think that probably really helps. So Hayley Stevens is 29. In the last year, she walked in on her husband and her best friend having an affair, and so she has packed up her entire life and she's decided to move into a little country cottage that she had fallen in love with and start a new life, start fresh. She's a writer, she thinks it'll be the perfect place to start writing. Suddenly she finds herself collecting this menagerie of animals, and it's hilarious. I think it is so adorable. She also meets Luke Mason, who is one of her neighbours, and they strike up first a friendship and then a mutual attraction to one another. She learns about farming, he helps her out with the animals that she seems to be acquiring left, right and centre. And then this story sort of gets this really lovely little magical realism spin on it, where Hayley starts seeing visions of a previous owner of the land that she currently owns. And it is just such a lovely, lovely story, and I love the little historical bent on it and the little bit of magical realism, which I really, really enjoy. So I highly recommend this one if you are interested in that sort of thing. The last review copy that I read this week was The Pharmacist's Wife by Vanessa Tate. This was sent to me by Alan Unwin, so again, thank you very much to them. It is a 2018 release from Corvus, I believe, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. This is historical fiction with a bit of a thriller element thrown into it. Rebecca Palmer is recently married, and her new husband opens a pharmacy in the town in which they live. And she is expecting that her life is going to be really quite lovely. She is trying to engage her husband, who is quite aloof and a bit removed from their romantic relationship. Then she really begins to discover that her husband is not quite what she thought. And in his pharmacy, he and a colleague of his have made a discovery of a new type of medicine. She begins to believe that Alexander, her husband, is having an affair, and in order to curb his wife's hysteria, he decides to treat her with this new medication that he has discovered. The drug in question is heroin. This story then becomes about addiction, about how men in Victorian Edinburgh might have viewed women. It is not a particularly flattering story for men in terms of the majority of the characters in the book. There are trigger warnings there for one, addiction, abuse, sexual assault. I spent a lot of this time angry at all of the male characters while still really enjoying the writing style, and I think that's the point. I think you have to divorce yourself from a little bit from reality when reading this, because the story itself is really gripping, because you really want to know if Vanessa is going to uncover the fact that her husband has got her addicted to a drug, because what she feels is just the addiction, and she knows that she needs the drug, but she doesn't really recognize the danger that Alexander has put her in to begin with. But yes, this was an interesting book, and I'm glad that I read it. I love the cover of it, and I think it's an interesting read. The last book that I read this week was The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness. I thought I better read another Patrick Ness book before I go and see him on Monday night. This was published in 2015 by Walker Books, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The tagline on this is "Not everyone has to be the chosen one," and really what this is a story about a group of 4 ordinary teenagers who live in a world where there are kids with incredible abilities. They don't really understand that world that these kids with abilities live in. They just know that they exist and that bad things happen around the kids and that they have a tendency to die early. And yet the main character in this, Mike, wonders, what if we could help? But his world is so filled with just everyday ordinary things that he has to deal with, alongside his own mental health issues. So he has OCD, his sister has an eating disorder, and he's trying to, make this world that he lives in make sense. And he's trying to look after himself and look after his sister and be a good friend and feel like he's giving enough into his group of friends and do all the right things and try and manage his illness. He struggles a lot with that, and he tries to make sense of the world while trying to make sense of his feelings towards one of his really good friends. I really appreciate that. I like contemporary with a bit of magical realism, or just that little bit of supernatural sort of stuff thrown in. I know that not everyone appreciates this particular story. I think there's a lot of mixed feelings about it, but I did really like it. I like how we get little snippets of those powered kids stories at the beginning of each chapter as it impacts on the story, but the main story is just the ordinary everyday, which turns out not to be ordinary everyday as well. So 4 out of 5 stars, I did really enjoy this. So those are the books that I read this week, feeling pretty happy about it. In the comments, let me know what you have been reading this week. Don't forget, I created a book tag about a week and a half ago, and that is the Infinity Stones book tag. I will leave a link to it up above. So if you would like to check it out, please feel free. I hope that wherever you're in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I will catch you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.